Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to Unparalleled Universe for another action figure comparison video. And in today's video, we have a triple threat match between what I believe are the three best versions of Tiger Stripe Wolverine. And what we have here on the right is the Mafex version. On the left, we have the Mezco 112 Collective. In the middle, we have the Marvel Legends Lovers Triangle 3-pack version. And all three of these are representing Wolverine in his Tiger Stripe uniform, which is often referred to as the Jim Lee uniform or the animated series version, whatever you want to call it. All three of these figures are attempting to represent that style of Wolverine. We're not going to waste too much time with this little intro here because I know a lot of people are interested to see how these figures match up with each other, so let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, so let's go ahead and start this off by talking about the sculpt work, the details, and the overall designs of these three figures. All three of them represent Wolverine in his Tiger Stripe costume, but they all do it in different ways. For instance, the Mezco version decided to take a more realistic approach, and I know that's the whole idea behind the Mezco 112 Collective action figures, but I kind of wish that they didn't do that with Wolverine because it doesn't really work. With a costume like this that's bright and cartoony, they should have tried to stick a little bit more to the comics. And seeing figures from like Beast Kingdom, it makes me think that they could have done that successfully without having to add the real world elements to this figure. And I really like this figure a lot, but when having him next to these guys, I like it a lot less because it's hard to take serious. I know it has a more realistic approach, but when you have him next to these guys, he just kind of looks like a guy dressing up like these guys. It's kind of weird, you know. I do appreciate the uniqueness of it though. I like the sculpted work on the forearms and on the boots and stuff, and it looks really nice. It's all very well done, but you know, when you put him next to these guys, he just doesn't look as good. He automatically goes down a couple notches because I don't feel like he represents the Tiger Stripe Wolverine as good as them two. And he does have a lot of good stuff going on. He has some similarities with the Marvel Legends one that I really didn't realize until I had him next to the Maifix one, because these two both decided to do the darker colors on the shoulder pads, the gloves, and the boots, and then they have the bright yellow and then the black tiger stripe. So there are similarities here, but the Mezco one definitely looks like its own thing, and it doesn't represent the Tiger Stripe Wolverine as good as the Legends one, in my opinion. So automatically the Mezco one is going to take a back seat as far as the design goes. I just don't think it's as good as these two. And then with these two, they both have a different approach to it as well. The Maifix one has a more video game type of look. It has bright colors. It still works for like the comic book and animated versions of Wolverine. I can't remember if Wolverine had blue stripes in the animated show from the 90s, but I know for sure he had blue stripes sometimes in the comic books. You could definitely Google that and see it. So it's not inaccurate, but just as far as like from like my personal preference, I just like the way the black stripes look a little bit better. So I wish that the Mafex one had black stripes, but at the same time, I do like the way that Mafex did their stripes because they have the actual tiger stripes. Over here, it's just like they're all connected and they don't look as good, and then we have some paint imperfections in there, and I just wish they would have went with just the straight up stripes. I don't know why they didn't, because on the Apocalypse Wave Wolverine, he does have the stripes. Let's see if we could bring him in here. See? He has the stripes like that. I don't know why the 3-pack Wolverine didn't do the same thing. I like that design a lot better. But as far as the colors go, I think I like the colors more on the Marvel Legends one. And I would say I also like the stature of the Marvel Legends one a little bit more because he looks a little bit more chunky, a little bit more beefy. The Mafex one doesn't look too bad, but I think he would have benefited from being a little bit shorter and stockier. But still, overall, I think that it captures the stature of Wolverine perfectly fine. I just think the Marvel Legends one does it a little bit better. And as I said, I do prefer the colors a little bit more on the Marvel Legends one. But there's a lot of design choices on the Mafex one that I like more. As I said, I like the stripes. I like the metallic look to all the shoulder pads and the blues and stuff like that. I know that's not for everybody, but me, I think it looks really cool and it really sells that animated look. So that is super dope. I wish the Marvel Legends one had like metallic shoulder pads. I think that would have been awesome. It would have made more sense than plastic looking shoulder pad. So yeah, just overall, it's really hard to say which one of these figures I think looks better. And that's saying a lot for the Marvel Legends one because this one is awesome. It has a really good stature and good colors, perfect like sculpt, and everything about it looks really nice. And same thing could be said with the Mafex one. And on top of all those things, the Mafex one has a much higher quality feel, and that's going to be obvious because of the price difference, you know, and we'll talk about the price difference a little bit later. But excluding that, if these figures cost the same, obviously the Mafex one feels a lot more high quality and feels good in the hand. All the joints are very smooth, and yeah, like I said, there's a lot of good stuff going on. I really like the fact that they sculpted all the details on here, and it's not just painted. And also there's a lot of subtle paint details in the yellow, so it just doesn't look like bright plastic yellow. That's something the Marvel Legends one did not do. There's no like paint details in there, and this figure would have benefited from some paint details in the muscles, and it would have looked awesome if they did that, but they decided not to. So it comes across a little toyish, and I know they're all toys, but I think you know what I mean. It comes across a little plastic and cheap, you know, but it is what it is. The Maifix one is better in that regard. I think the belt on the Maifix one is better only because the way they designed it. It doesn't get in the way at all because it's a loose piece, but it's attached in the back, so it doesn't get in the way of the articulation. On the Marvel Legends one, it doesn't really get in the way too much either. It kind of hinders the swivel because, you know, it's right there, and then it kind of goes too high and it looks weird. And if you try to bring it down, you know, just kind of, let's see, you could bring it under and maybe swivel over it. But yeah, it gets in the way a little bit, but it's not too bad. It's not like a huge flaw or anything. I just like the way that the Mafex one did it better. And this one looks a little bit off, so let's see if we can fix it. There we go. And both of these figures do a really good job of incorporating the articulation into the sculpt. There's no joints that look bad. Obviously, the Mafex one does it a little bit better because they have cool things going on, like, you know, no peg holes in the arms, and that's just awesome. I love that. I know it's a small detail, but it looks good. Same thing on the legs. And, you know, aside from that, all the obvious joints are showing, like the elbows and the knees, but everything else is pretty well hidden, and that's the case on both of these figures. And as for the head sculpts, all three of these figures come with 3 different heads each, so we're going to start off by taking a look at the head sculpts that are the most neutral. So first off, the Mezco one is the only one that has a 5 o'clock shadow, so he definitely gets credit for that. And I think even though the figure has a realistic look and all that stuff, the head sculpt is still pretty good, comic book accurate Tiger Stripe Wolverine, so that's good. The Marvel Legends one looks really nice too. It lacks some detail, especially like in the teeth. It's just pretty much white paint thrown in there. But the one thing I do love about this one is the fact that he has like gold eyes. I think that's an awesome approach, and it's not so gold that it's distracting. It still looks light, but it's a little bit different, so that's cool. And then the Mafex one is awesome too. It's probably the best like just regular head sculpt out of all these. The one thing I'd say is that it's missing the 5 o'clock shadow, but I do like the long ears a lot. I know there's mixed feelings about it, but I think that's awesome. I think it looks good. The only thing is I just wish that he had a 5 o'clock shadow. That's the only thing that would have made that one better, but it's really cool to have just a straight up really well done neutral looking Wolverine head. I do like the Marvel Legends one as well, but you know, I just wish that the paint was a little bit better in the teeth. Aside from that, I don't have any big problem with it. I think it looks good. The ears, I know a lot of people say that they should be sticking out a little bit more, and I do agree with that, but as is, it's not horrible or anything. I've always liked that head sculpt. The Mezco one is pretty good too, but overall I would say that I like the Mafex neutral head sculpt the most. And all 3 of them come with an angry alternate head. First off, right off the bat, the Mezco one isn't very good, mostly because of the teeth. It looks like his gums are flesh colored and they just threw some white paint into his mouth. And the Marvel Legends one is pretty cool because the uniqueness of it. On this one here, it's kind of battle damage. You could see some like hair coming out of the top. The ear things are all messed up. Look, it looks like there's a bullet hole in there, so that is really cool. I like that that's different. The only flaw here is that once again, they really didn't put that much like love into the paint detail because the mouth kind of looks weird. The tongue is like a light flesh color rather than red. They could have made that a lot better. And then the Mafex one looks really good too, but it's a little generic. He just has gritting teeth and he just kind of looks angry, but it's a nice head sculpt. But I think as far as the angry head sculpts go, I'll probably give it to the Marvel Legends one just because of the uniqueness of it. I think it's really cool to have like a battle damage head. That's awesome. It would have been dope if Mafex had that too. And then all 3 of them have unmasked heads. Once again, the Mezco one kind of falls flat. It's just not a very good head sculpt for Wolverine. I mean, the face is okay, but again, the teeth and the facial expression just kind of ruin it. But the details there, and it's well done, but I just don't like the design. And then for the Marvel Legends one, I don't know what they were thinking over here. This head sculpt, I mean, it's kind of grown on me. I don't think that it's horrible or anything, but it's not very good. And it's funny because this figure came in the Lover's Triangle 3-pack with Cyclops and Jean, and this just kind of looks like he'd be staring at them through a window, making out or something, making this face, you know. It's just so weird. But the Mafex one is really nice. I think that's a very good unmasked Logan head sculpt, and I think the Mafex one is going to win this by far as the unmasked head sculpt goes. And as far as switching heads on these 3 figures, it's a little difficult because the peg sizes are different on all 3 of them. But if you want to get creative, you could definitely make it work. Like, you are able to put the Marvel Legends head onto the Mafex neck and maybe throw some blue tack in there, and it does look really good. And then I did see on the Foosh that Robo's figure, one of his heads from the Mafex figure, didn't have the insert on the inside of the head, so he was able to just stick that right onto the Marvel Legends body. Mine, that wasn't the case on mine. All my heads are perfectly fine, so I'm not able to do that. But if you want to dig that out, I mean, it's possible to take that thing out and stick the head onto the body, and that would probably look pretty cool, right? There you go. How's that look? Floating head deal. But yeah, that would probably look pretty good. And then for the Mezco stuff, you can't really, let's see what we could do here. Once again, same kind of thing with the Mafex heads. You can't stick them on there because the peg just doesn't fit. Let's see if the Marvel Legends ones can fit on there. I doubt it because they're small. Let's see. Yeah, that really, that won't work. That's too small and it clashes too much. And then as far as putting the Mezco heads onto the Marvel Legends figure, let's check that out. Might be a little too big. Yeah, it's a little too big, but I don't know. It looks kind of cool, I guess. And same thing with the Mafex one. It's too big. It just falls down on the neck. There he goes. Yeah, so that doesn't really work. I guess the only real possibility we have here is throwing some blue tack into the Legends head and throwing it on here. I guess that's the only real thing that I could say can be done between switching the heads with all these figures. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about claws. Obviously, each one of these figures comes with a set of hands with the metal claws popped out, and we're going to go ahead and go from worst to best. In my opinion, I think the Marvel Legends version has the worst metal claws, only because they look so plastic, and I really dislike that when it comes to Wolverine claws. And another thing with them is that they're always crooked. Right out of the package, they're never straight. You often have to glue them down to make them sit right. So I really don't like the Marvel Legends claws. They just look kind of weird on the fist. They don't quite reach the little ports on the fist either. So they just don't look very good. The length is good though. I think that's cool. And I actually like the shape and the sculpt, but I just don't like how they look so plastic and how they're just so messed up in the fist there. But the one thing I love about this figure is that he comes with bone claws, and how awesome is that? I think every Wolverine figure should come with bone claws. I know it's from a specific era in the 90s, but still, they're awesome. So I do like the bone claws a lot. He definitely gets points for that, but you know, as far as the metal claws go, they are not very good. And you know what, to be honest with you, I think it's pretty even between the claws on these two figures. I know a lot of people like to say that the Mafex claws are too long, and I could see where they're coming from, but honestly, I don't mind the length of the claws. I guess it would have benefited the figure overall if they were a little bit shorter, but as they are, I still like them. I think they look good. I think the shape of them is nice. I like the metallic color. I like the sculpt of them, but I think the Mezco one has all that too without the problem of them being too long. Dang, they're way shorter than the Mafex ones. Look at that. But they both have that metallic kind of look to it. And, you know, these kind of, I don't know. I don't get like the whole thing about, oh, these couldn't even really fit in the forearm. To me, it's like, who cares? I mean, you know, whatever. I'm not, that argument just is funny to me. But, you know, so if people have that complaint, the Mezco claws are better. They could obviously fit in the forearm if that's what you care about. But yeah, in my opinion, it's very close between these two in terms of the quality of the claws. They both have a metallic kind of paint job to them. They're both very sturdy. They don't feel like they're going to break. I would say the Mezco ones are a little bit more sturdy and they feel more realistic. So yeah, I don't know. I guess I'll go ahead and say that the Mezco claws are better. But it's very, very close. I think the claws are very cool on both of these figures. I just feel like the Mezco ones are a little bit more realistic. So I realize this is kind of a weird category, but I do feel like it's essential to Wolverine's character. And in order to determine which figure is superior, we must discuss who did the better arm hair. And I would have to say, for the Marvel Legends one, they did not do a very good job because they basically just sculpted a bunch of lines into the arm and they didn't paint it. So it doesn't really sell the illusion of hair. The Mezco one did a pretty good job. It has some sculpt work and some paint, but still, it just doesn't look like arm hair to me. But the Maifix one just kind of has a simple approach. They basically just painted lines on there. And even though that seems simple, I think it sells the illusion of hair much better than the Marvel Legends one by far, and it does it better than the Mezco one too. The Mezco one, it's decent. I mean, they definitely tried, but it just didn't work out. But I do feel like the Mafex one executed the arm hair the best out of the three. So as far as the sculpt work, the design, the details, and the overall look, I'm going to give it to the Mafex one. Even though the Mezco one looks really good, and I do appreciate the uniqueness with it, and everything is executed very well on that figure. The details on the gloves and boots look incredible, but he just doesn't give me that comic book vibe enough for me to put him over the Mafex one. So, you know, he's not quite there. And to be honest with you, he doesn't, as far as the look and design goes, he doesn't even really top the Marvel Legends one. I think the Marvel Legends one is a close number 2 to the Maifix one. I really like the dark blues and bright yellows on the Marvel Legends one, and I also like the build of the figure, but it just doesn't do enough to top the Maifix one in my opinion. The Maifix one just has really nice sculpting work on it. I love the paint details on the muscles, and I just like how all the details that are just painted on the Marvel Legends one are actually sculpted on the Maifix one. I think that's awesome. In addition to that, I think the face sculpt is a lot better on the Maifix one than it is on either of the other two figures. And even though he's not the colors I would have preferred, those colors grew on me, and now I really don't have a problem with them at all, really. I mean, I would like to get a version that had the black stripes, but if we don't, I'm perfectly fine with this one. I think this one looks incredible, and they just did a really good job. And on top of all that, I think the arm hair is better executed on that Maifix one. So in this category, we got to give it to the Maifix version. And as far as the accessories go, there's not a whole lot going on here. Each figure comes with 3 different heads. Each figure has multiple hands. The Marvel Legends one does have bone claw hands, and I think that's awesome, but that kind of gets canceled out because he didn't come with just normal fist with the claws retracted. And the Maifix one, for the price, should have come with a lot more. He only comes with pretty much the essentials and nothing really unique. He does have the cowl down effect, and that's cool, but Marvel Legends has that as well. The Mezco version does not have that, but he does have the most interchangeable hands, and on top of that, he does come with the mask of Ogon. So this is a huge thing, and this is the reason why I'm going to give the edge to the Mezco one in the accessories department. The Marvel Legends one, you know, you could probably argue that he comes with more than just this because he's in a 3-pack with other figures. You know, he comes with Cyclops and Jean Grey, and if you're buying that whole set just to get Wolverine, I guess you could consider them accessories, but you know, not really. And then when it comes to the Mafex one, it was really disappointing the amount of accessories that he came with. He should have come with like maybe even one more head, another set of hands, maybe like some gripping hands. Maybe he could have come with the sword. It would have been awesome if he came with the mask of Ogon. There's other stuff they could have put in there with Wolverine, but they just gave us the bare essentials. So for that reason, I have to give it up to the Mezco one when it comes to the accessories. He wins this category. Okay, so now for the scale and how well these figures are able to cross over into other lines, because I really don't like to judge figures based on how they compare to other lines, but if we're trying to find out the definitive Wolverine, it's important to see how each one of these look next to other action figure lines. So let's go ahead and get into it, starting with the Marvel Legends Cyclops and the Mezco Cyclops joining Wolverine here. And as you can see, the Mezco Wolverine looks way too tall next to the Marvel Legends Cyclops, so that really won't work. The Mafex Wolverine looks pretty good next to this Cyclops, but he's not as short as I would like. But over here, the Marvel Legends one looks really good next to the Mezco Cyclops. He's a lot shorter. He looks awesome. And if you switch these around, put the Marvel Legends Cyclops over here next to that Wolverine, then he still looks tall enough and still looks good. So I really like the height of this Wolverine figure. I think it works out really well. Over here, the Mafex Wolverine looks pretty good next to this Cyclops, especially because he's a little bit taller. And I will say I think that the Mezco Wolverine looks pretty good next to this Cyclops too, but I wish he was a little bit shorter. I just think he's a little too tall. She pretty much has to stay with Mezco figures, not only because of scale, but also because stylistically he just doesn't really work with other figures. Let's go ahead and get Cyclops out of here real quick, and we'll throw in Wolverine's best buddy in the whole world, Nightcrawler. And once again, the Mezco figure doesn't really work with Nightcrawler. He's way too tall. He's about the same height as Kurt, and I don't hate that, but I feel like Wolverine should definitely be shorter than Nightcrawler. And over here with the Mafex one does look pretty good next to Nightcrawler. Once again, he could benefit from being a little bit shorter. And then we have the Mafex comic book Spider-Man, since we don't have any other Mafex X-Men figures. So there he is, and I think as far as the comic book figures go, the Mafex figures scale pretty well with each other so far. I think Wolverine is a good height next to this Spider-Man. Spider-Man is definitely a little bit taller than Wolverine, as he should be, so that's good. And the Spider-Man looks awesome next to the Marvel Legends Wolverine as well. But at the end of the day, as far as the scale goes, I do feel like the Mafex one could be mixed in with your various action figure lines, whether it's Mezco, Marvel Legends, or whatever. And same thing could be said for the Marvel Legends version. You could put them with your Mafex figures, or even your Mezco figures. I think he still looks cool next to Cyclops, you know. But the Mezco Wolverine doesn't necessarily work with other lines. He kind of just has to stay with Mezco figures, which is fine. That's the reason why he was made, you know. He wasn't made to fit in with these other figures. But you know, I know that's part of the appeal when you pick up any given figure, how well you could fit it into your specific collection that you're making. I don't keep my Mafex with Mafex or Legends with Legends. I mix a lot of things up, so I think it's important to just kind of mix it up here. And as far as the articulation goes, I'm not going to run through the articulation on each one of these figures. If you want to see an in-depth look at the articulation, go ahead and check out my reviews for these guys. I did a review on each one of them, so you can check that out there. Here, I just want to go through a couple different poses and see which figures are easiest to get into certain poses. For this one here, it was a little tough on Wolverine because his arm is really tight, and the way that the shoulder pad works, it's just attached to the top of the shoulder joint there, so it's going to go wherever the shoulder joint goes, and it kind of gets in the way if you're trying to bring his arm up. For the Maifix one, it's different because the shoulder joint is attached in the back, so you have some movement, you have some clearance. You could do what you want to do with the arm and then put the shoulder pad where it needs to be to cover up the joint, so you could get his arm way up here without any problem, have it look like he's swinging back to slice something in half. So that is awesome stuff. And these figures have a lot of good points of articulation. They all have double jointed elbows, double jointed knees, they all have lower leg swivel, upper thigh swivel, they all have pretty good movement at the head. The Marvel Legends one just has a typical ball joint. The Mezco one and the Mafex one both have similar neck joints where you get movement at the lower neck and at the upper neck where it meets the head. So there's a lot of good movement here with these figures. And also a similarity between the Mezco one and the Mafex one is they both have that double jointed torso situation where you get movement at the waist and at the abdomen. And I love the way that joint works. That works out really good. It doesn't work so good for the Mezco one because he has his clothing, but for the most part, it's not as hindered as you might think. You could get some movement out of it if you work with it. So it's definitely not as smooth as getting movement out of the Mafex one. And then over here for the Marvel Legends one, he basically just has like the typical ab crunch. I really wish that he had like some type of diaphragm swivel. If he had that, oh man, this guy would be really tough to beat in the articulation department. That's really the only thing he's missing. And also the shoulder joints just can't compare to the Mafex one. They're just really good. But as far as the shoulder joints on the Mezco one, they're not very good at all. They're super tight, and they have a similar thing going on with the shoulder pad where it just kind of attached to the top of the shoulder and it just goes where the shoulder goes. Not only that, they're super loose. This thing is always falling off. It does kind of have like a hinge thing, so you could bring it up and it kind of gets out of the way, but for the most part it's just kind of there. And you know, Maifix definitely did the shoulder joint the best. But let's see a couple of other poses here. And getting these figures into like a crouch type of position, maybe like he's kind of, you know, staking someone out ready to attack or something weird like that. I don't know. I was just trying to get them into a really deep crouching position, and I think both the Maifix version and the Marvel Legends version accomplished that pretty well. Check that out. And then we have the Marvel Legends one. I mean, the Mezco one that looks kind of funny. He's not able to get into as deep of a crouch as those other figures, but yeah, that's something that's definitely possible. You could get these guys kind of, you know, hunching over. Maybe it looks a little less funny if we bring his claws down like that, kind of like, you know, something like that. And that's a little, you know, it's a little harder to get Wolverine's claws in front of him as good as the Mafex one, but yeah, you definitely have some a lot of range between these two figures. You could definitely get him into a pretty deep crouch. Can't really do that with the Mezco one. Okay, so here's another pose where you could have Wolverine kind of slashing someone above him or something like that, maybe fighting the Hulk or a Sentinel or something. And the Mafex one was much easier to get into this pose, and it looks more natural. It was more smooth and everything, mostly because of that torso joint. I'm telling you, if this Wolverine, the Marvel Legends one, had like the Lightning Collection type of setup for the torso, this thing would be like untouchable, man. The Mezco one, once again, can't really get there. But, you know, articulation, I guess, isn't Mezco's strong point, I guess. I guess it's just the aesthetic and the look, which is the main attraction for a Mezco figure. But, you know, with Wolverine, that's a character that I'm going to want to play with and put him into a lot of cool poses and try to do a bunch of cool action figure photography and all that good stuff. And I think as far as that goes, you're better off with the Mafex one. He by far has the best articulation. He has the most points of articulation, and it's also the smoothest and easiest to use. So as far as the articulation goes, the Mafex one is going to win by a lot. Okay, so before I make a decision that I'll have to stick with for the rest of my life, let's go ahead and do a quick recap. As far as the overall look, sculpt, design, and details go, I'm going to give it to the Mafex version. I think he looks a lot better than the other two. There are a lot of elements to the Marvel Legends one that I like a lot, and that's why he's at the second place spot, but I just don't think that he catches the Mafex one. The Mezco one looks awesome too, but he's just not what I want out of a comic book version of Tiger Stripe Wolverine. And then as far as the accessories go, I'm going to give that to the Mezco one because because of the Ogon mask. And as far as scale goes, I feel like the Marvel Legends one fits in with most other lines because of the build of the figure. Like his stature is perfect. He's just like short and stubby, and he looks good next to other lines. The Maifix one does too. He looks really good next to Maifix figures. He looks good next to Mezco figures, and he looks really great next to Marvel Legends. But the crossover isn't as perfect as it is with the Marvel Legends one, so I'll go ahead and give the scale to the Marvel Legends. And then as far as the articulation goes, the Mafex totally destroys the other two figures. It's not even close, to be honest with you. The articulation on the Legends one is pretty good, but it's nowhere near as smooth and functional as the Mafex. The Mezco doesn't have the greatest articulation. It's pretty decent, but it doesn't even touch the Legends one, to be honest with you. And like I said, the Mafex one just dominates as far as the articulation goes. And I think that's all the categories that we care about, right? So in my opinion, the best figure out of these three is the Mafex one. He's just too good. He's such a fun figure to mess around with. The sculpt is beautiful, the articulation is awesome, and it's just a pretty much perfect Wolverine. But before we get out of here, there's one more thing I want to talk about, and that is the value. When it comes to the Mafex figure, he's very expensive. He'll cost you between $70 and $90. Everybody's saying he's $100 plus shipping, blah 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 blah. He's not that expensive. You could definitely find it for a more reasonable price, but it's still gonna cost you, $80 or something like that. That's a lot to pay for a figure, and not everybody was happy with how the arms came off. To me, I wasn't too pissed off about it. They did come off. I plugged them back in, and that was the end of the story. It's fine. So a lot of people were going crazy, and they felt like, that shouldn't be a case with a $100 figure, and that's fair. I'm not going to argue that. That's perfectly fine if that's how you feel. In my opinion, it wasn't a big deal, but I understand that if you get a figure, you open it up, and it's falling apart, it could be a little frustrating. So that's something you have to consider when you're going to pay for an $80 figure, and that's fine. To me, it was no big deal. The Mezco one, at this point, you can't find it for a decent price. It's crazy expensive, but even when it first came out, it had its issues. I was happy that I only paid retail. To be honest with you, if I paid more than retail, I wouldn't have been very happy. I would have been super pissed if I paid $150 and I was able to see that yellow stitching in the trunks, and that's not cool. And then the shoulder pads falling off and stuff like that. There's nothing happening with that figure that makes me hate it or anything. I still love that figure, but if we're talking value, if I would have paid $150 for that figure, I would have been pissed off with some of the issues that it had. But when it comes to the Marvel Legends one, I would say that he's the best value. He's not the best figure out of the three. The Mafex one is, but I do feel like the Marvel Legends one is the best value because you could go to your local GameStop, and I think he costs, I think mine costs like $65 or something like that. He comes in a 3-pack with Cyclops and Jean Grey. It's a very cool 3-pack. All three figures are awesome. I did like a comparison video / review for that set a while back. You can check that out. I'll leave that in the description below. But I like that 3-pack a lot, and I really, really love this Wolverine. For me, all these figures have their place. To be honest with you, the Mezco one will just stay with the Mezco figures, and he looks great with them, and I love it. The Mafex one is going to be the one that I'll use the most for photography or just messing around with because he's so cool. The articulation is so fun to play with, but mostly for photography. And if you want a Wolverine that you could get the most out of, it's going to be the Mafex one. So that's what he's there for. The Marvel Legends one, obviously he'll probably go on my Marvel Legends display or any random X-Men display I have, but I'll be honest with you, I like to take figures with me places, like if I travel, I take figures with me, or if I'm driving out of town for the day, I'll take a figure with me, put it in my pocket, and a lot of times I like to take Wolverine figures. I know that might be a stupid thing to even consider, but for me, that has value. I like that I could just grab a figure off the shelf and go somewhere with it and mess around with it, pull it out of my pocket, pose it around, do whatever, take some pictures, all kinds of cool stuff. I don't have to worry about losing or breaking an $80 figure or a $100 figure or nothing crazy like that. And that's valuable to me, so that's something that I consider when I buy figures. Can I grab that figure and mess around with it without too much stress? And this Marvel Legends Wolverine, yes, I can. So every one of these figures has their place in my collection. I'm happy to own all three. So anyways, I think that's it. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. Thank you very much. Peace.